The following episode of the Maui Chamber of Commerce's Business Matters was originally broadcast on October 4th, 2022.
Good morning. It's time now for Business Matters with Pam Toompop.
Morning. Thank you so much. I'm Pam Toompop, president of the Maui Chamber of Commerce, and this is Business Matters radio show sponsored by Localella Airlines. We're thrilled you could join us today. We're going to discuss attainable housing and learn more about West Maui Land Company. We're going to talk about charter amendments coming up on the ballot this election, and we're going to start our morning off thinking about delicious chocolate and what it takes to make superior specialty chocolate here in Maui. But we're going to start off first talking with DeLeon Payne of West Maui Land Company. He grew up in Haiku and Lahaina, graduated from Lahaina Luna, class of 2003, has a BS in Urban Rural Environmental Planning from Brigham Young University, 5 years in Sports Marketing Management, nearly spent the last 10 years as a realtor, and 5 years now at West Maui Land, with his primary focus being on affordable housing. He's been very involved in the West Maui Community Plan Advisory Committee and is married to his wife, Kristen, and has 3 children, Bryn, 9, Knox, 7, and Ace, 4. So clearly a very busy man. Good morning, Dylan, and thank you for joining us this morning.
Good morning, Pam. Thanks for having me.
It's my pleasure. Well, first of all, I just want to say West Maui Land has been very involved in affordable housing and rentals and looking at projects for a very long time, looking at unique solutions. And I want to start with there, but I also have to say that we're seeing the trucks everywhere on the road. So you've clearly have a lot going on. But let's talk about kind of the roots of the company and the work that you're doing in attainable housing that people can actually get into.
Sure. Yeah, sounds great.
So tell us a little bit about some of the key projects that you folks are working on right now.
We're always looking for new opportunities to try to provide housing for Maui families. West Maui Land started just kind of with a group of people from Maui, longtime residents that have been here and made Maui their home. Peter Martin was the principal, and he's still integrally involved, but it's kind of grown into a group of primarily Kama'aina people. Most of the people that work on projects day in and day out, grew up here and have deep roots here on Maui and care deeply about our community. For the past, I would say, 5 or 7 years maybe, our primary focus has been trying to build affordable housing, and you would think that it would be something that would be very supported on all fronts because we're facing such a dire housing crisis here on Maui. But I'll tell you, it's very challenging to get a project approved. Most of what we've done over the past few years has been 100% affordable housing, meaning all of the homes developed in some of our projects have fallen under workforce housing guidelines, and we've been successful in doing a project in Lahaina called Kahoma Homes, and then a few up in Haiku, Pauela Homes next to the Haiku Elementary School. And then our latest projects that we just kind of wrapped up were both the Heritage at Maui Lani and then Waiale Elua in Waikapu. And now, honestly, we're looking for the next thing. We've had a few projects turned down by the Maui County Council, and so we don't have a workforce housing project that we're really working on right now. We're looking for new opportunities.
Let's talk about that for a minute, because, like you said, we are in a housing crisis, and the Maui Chamber of Commerce now has housing as one of its top priorities. We serve the business community, but business community is seeing a reduction of workforce because their employees can't afford to stay here. And even with wage increases and things that are happening, the cost of housing is escalating, and we don't have enough. So, can you share some of the reasons why some of the projects were turned down? You've built many successful projects. What seems to be the biggest sticking point that the council wants to overcome in terms of why they're turning the projects down?
That's a great question, Pam, and I wish I had a clear answer and could point to one thing. But as an observer, I would say it's more often than not, it's kind of a death by 1,000 cuts for a project. It's never really any one thing, but it maybe it might be a lack of infrastructure or a lack of timing or a lack of community support, and often it's a combination of those things. But perhaps the biggest driver here is what people in the field refer to as NIMBYism, or not in my backyard, where the existing community will say, "Oh, well, we don't want housing here," or there's this stigma around workforce or affordable housing, and people say, "Well, we don't want it near us. Go build it somewhere else." It's the right project in the wrong place is what you hear, and it's like, well, we're facing such a shortage of housing, and like you mentioned, it kind of spills into every other facet of life here on Maui, where there's not enough people to work at Ace Hardware in Lahaina now, so they have to adjust their hours and they close early, or there's not enough teachers at Lahaina Luna High School, so often several classes get collapsed into one that are led by a substitute teacher. And so this housing shortage is having major impacts on our community. And the overarching feeling is maybe it's just an anti-growth sentiment, and I can relate to that. People don't like change, and we want to see Maui stay the way it's been and the way it was, when I was growing up as a kid. At the same time, I think we do need to grow, and we need to grow intelligently so that we can preserve, what's so special about Maui, and so that families from Maui can stay here, because it's really the people that make the place special. And if all these local families have to leave because they can't afford to live here, then we've lost the thing that's most important about this place.
Yeah. And, this has been going on, this death by 1,000 cuts. I mean, people for years keep saying, well, this person promised this and that person promised that, but the promises came when the development happened, and the development often didn't happen due to these death by 1,000 cuts, where they just kept adding and heaping on things where projects didn't pencil out. Mm-hmm. And yet we're continuing in this crisis to see this, and it's very scary. So people are looking at new models now, saying, okay, we want to protect. Well, first of all, the NIMBYism thing. At some point, we just have to say that it's our diversity that makes us a beautiful place. So we need to get people to get off this "not in my backyard" and embrace our diversity, and we need to get housing for our workforce. And there is growing movements of YIMBYism, yes, in my backyard. It's slow, right. But and we want to. I think, as you're pointing out too, again, we want to keep Maui, and we want to keep the beauty and keep the area pristine and continue to have the lifestyles that you and I grew up with such a beautiful place, but also without housing, then our families can't stay here. So there's a lot of people talking now about, density and going up a little bit. and smaller lot sizes, but getting people in homes and giving them home ownership. What are some of the concepts that you folks are exploring to sort of find a balance and yet get worker housing done and look at what can work?
That's a really, really good question. And I feel like our group has been successful in, finding solutions, probably more than anything just because we're stubborn and we don't give up. I don't know that we're the most creative bunch. We try to be, but really the answers are quite simple. You just need the county council to say yes. And I think everybody there is well-intentioned and well-meaning, and everybody generally wants the same thing, but often there's a disagreement on how to solve the issue. And oftentimes the council will say, well, we're just going to make more rules and add more layers of kind of regulation to solve the problem. And in my experience, that usually works in the opposite direction. And I guess one example I'll give is, so in Hawaii, land use we're one of the most regulated states in the country when it comes to land use. There are several layers of land use entitlement that you need to have in order to develop a piece of land. At the very bottom of that, so the most kind of granular level, is zoning. And that's what most people are familiar with, but there's all these other levels above it that also have to line up. At the zoning level, and that's something that the county can control, Maui, we have about 460,000 acres of land on Maui. Of that 460,000 acres, about 95% of that land is either designated as agriculture or conservation. And so that leaves only about 6% of the land area on Maui for urban development, where you talked about, adding density. And there's this common refrain of, hey, we don't want Maui to become Oahu or to become overdeveloped. I think if we take a very small amount of that land from agriculture and convert it into urban uses, we can go a long way to solving our housing problem and really address the issue for some of our families that are having to leave to the mainland. But that's going to take a lot of courage and political will to do that. So that's what I would encourage. And the neat thing about that is if they do that, then really the county can direct where that growth will occur, because they can proactively say, hey, we're gonna rezone areas here, and here, and encourage growth in that area, and that's where the developers will go, and that's where they'll build. So it could be this really great sort of public-private partnership that I think of all the solutions that people have looked at, that's the one thing that I would think could have the biggest impact. And it would also kind of help to preserve all of the open space and ag land that we have here on Maui that is so vital, to the fabric of this place as well. So it would be beneficial in both directions, but that's what I would focus on.
I think that's an excellent point, Dylan. And to think about it at that high level, we get 460,000 acres, which is like an acre is just over about 10,000 square foot lots, to kind of help people put it in perspective. So we have 460,000 acres. But, given the way that it's zoned, and again, a lot of it is in ag and conservation, but it's not all in vital ag, right? A lot of that ag land is active and productive agricultural farming. So,
right.
But so revisiting that with an eye for planning and a tool for how we solve our challenges, but also preserving and getting back to those sort of long-range plans that includes, again, addressing this critical need in areas. I think that's so important. I know we're working on efforts at the Chamber as well just to try and even put roofs over people's heads. We've just allowed the parking by the J. Walter Cameron Center as a way so that people who are sleeping in their cars won't get moved in the middle of the night or ticketed, and that's not the right step, but it is a Band-Aid. But the key thing really is getting housing and real solutions. So I'm glad to hear you bring that up, because that's not something that we hear a lot about, is, looking at this from that high-level view and looking at the acreage we do have and going back and saying, all right, we've got a lot of land here. Now how can we proactively redo this? And I do want to add to your point that we hear a lot of council members say, yes, and we need to do it expediently, and they ran for office saying, housing, we've got a critical need, and we're going to make a big difference. And, recently one developer asked them during the council meeting, well, how many units during your past tenure, this past term, how many units did you folks get built? And so much time and energy was spent on legislation that stalled things. I mean, there was just even a 201H process, which is a statewide process, and Maui County wanted to just change it for themselves and get a higher limit, asking for more. And we know that doesn't work. And we saw that years past with Danny Mateo trying to do a similar effort. And it got us 11 houses over a very long period of time. So we know that the more hindrances we put in, the more we slow down progress on affordable housing and rentals.
That's right.
So I think your portion, which is to say, let's get back to the political will. Let's talk to council members. Let's work on them to say how they can say yes and how they can expedite affordable housing and rentals. Because this is that time, and this is also an election year, and we need solutions, and we need them now.
Yep, I agree.
Well, Dylan, I have loved having you on the show this morning. Let's do it again sometime soon. And
I'd love to.
Thank you. We'd love to have you back on, and I just want to wish you a warm aloha and hope you have a beautiful Maui day.
Oh, thank you so much, Pam. Have a great day.
I will. You too. All right. We are going to take a moment to have a brief message from our sponsor, Localella Airlines, and then we'll be right back.
Localella Airlines operates the largest commuter airline hub in the country, right here in Kahului. Fly Mokulele from Kahului to Molokai, Lanai, Hana, Waimea, Kona, and now Hilo. Mokulele also operates the only flights between Kapalua and Honolulu. There is never a middle seat on Mokulele, and every seat has a window and aisle. Visit mokuleleairlines.com and take your next flight from the newly renovated Mokulele Terminal.
Thank you, Gary. Our next guest is Dave DeLeon. And Dave is known to many people across Maui because he has had a great career. He has had 40 years of involvement with the County of Maui, working with 2 administrations. He also served on the last 2 charter commissions. And maybe we can get him to tell us the differences between those 2, because it's been a wild ride, it seems, this session. And he recently ran, as he said, unsuccessfully for county council this year, but he did put his hat in the ring trying to make a positive difference in Maui County. Aloha, Dave. Good morning and welcome to the show.
Good morning. Good morning. How are you?
I'm great. How are you this morning?
Awake, fed the chickens, got the dog going, and everything's fine.
I love it when you say fed the chickens. Of course, that means you're up early.
Yep.
They get you up, don't they?
Yes, they do.
Oh, well, you have been on 2 charter commissions, and I would love to just hear a brief overview of how they might compare and contrast from this session to the last one.
Yeah, well, the chief difference is the one in 2002 or 12. I'm sorry, 12 was more of a traditional. It's been a tradition where the mayor appoints the body, and the council confirms them. In this cases, you get citizens who are interested in the government, but you don't get activists. In this current charter commission, the voters had agreed to a proposal to change the way that the appointment process happened. So they had 9 members coming from the council and only 2 from the mayor. And I was one of the mayor's appointments. And very much this commission had a lot of really dramatic ideas about how they could change the charter and to make the government work better. And just a lot of concepts aiming at change. A lot of the change was aimed at giving the council more power than the mayor was allowed.
Yeah.
It's allowed in the charter, and that was something that one of the main reasons I got on the commission was I was afraid that we were going to go back to the county manager proposal again, and we did. But we were able to change some folks' minds, and that didn't happen. So that's not on this charter proposal. The last one was the main issue was whether we should be changing our electoral system to single-member districts, and that could not get traction. I was a chief proponent of that. I was the activist on that commission, actually, trying to propose that, I went down in flames. This wouldn't hatch because the people who were on that board weren't there to create change so much as just to fix what they thought needed to be fixed, and I didn't think the electoral system needed to be fixed, so it wasn't even proposed. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
So, so that's in the thumbnail. That's kind of where the difference. This one was very much an activist commission where they had a lot of ideas, and some of that stuff is still apparent in the proposals coming before you, and some of them not so much.
Yeah, I was really, I guess, surprised by the process in that there were so many ideas that came forward that were, as we as the chamber trying to track it along the way or just even react at the very beginning, much like you folks, I'm sure, there was so little information about, here's like an idea and blah, there it is. It's just thrown out there. No rationale as to why, no consideration about how it might work or not work or what it might cost or not cost or say, how it might save us money. It just, a bunch of things just seemed to be thrown against the wall without much illustration of what the rationale was behind it, and we were really struggling at the beginning, trying to figure out how to even ring in.
Well, on the commissioner side, it was like a fire hose. And we were actually making decisions every 15 minutes. But that was when we had like 100 proposals, and then we got it down to like 85, and then the 20s, and I think the commission at the end came to the conclusion that the voters can only digest so much, and so it's going to have to be something that the voters could, the focus changed more from an activist proposal of concept to more of one aimed at the job at hand, which was what needs to be changed in the county. And some of the activist stuff is still in here, but again, not like it was in the beginning.
Right.
So generally, I'm kind of pleased with the outcome. There's still some rough points, but not everybody's going to agree with Dave all the time. That's for sure, because he's got his own opinions, and so it's not necessarily the way it works. But I want to follow up on the conversation you were just having about housing and about the need to be changing things. And the voters will have an opportunity to do that in this upcoming election. With the first proposal on the ballot, it's going to be for a housing department to be created.
Yes.
And the way that the housing department was organized in this proposal, it's a housing development department. It's not a social service. It's not just an agency full of bureaucrats. It's supposed to be an agency full of entrepreneurs pushing and doing whatever they can to get to meet our housing demand. Our demand, we're about 10,000 units short for the population we have now. So that's why the extreme cost. That's why the extreme rents. That's why people are leaving.
Right.
And as a candidate, I kept hearing, it wasn't just me. It was almost every other candidate running on the same message. We're losing our kids. We're losing our families. We're losing our middle class. We can't keep doctors and nurses and teachers and police officers. So it's going to be hard to run a good society if we don't have enough housing. And it's not like the mainland where you can go over the mountain and then there's more housing out there. You just have to drive further. I mean, we either have the housing here on the island or we don't.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We supported that. That was an amendment that, again, while we always look at the size and cost of government, we really saw a critical need for this focus.
Yeah, I like to equate it to like if you lived in Northern California and you didn't have a fire department. So we're in that kind of emergency. We're in that kind of crisis, and we don't have a housing department.
Right.
And the current housing department is it's called the Department of Housing and Human Concerns. And if you look in the charter, the only place the word housing appears is in the title.
Yeah.
There's no focus on housing at all. And the people who are in the department now are doing their very best,
a great job.
very best to do what they can with the resources they got.
Yeah.
But we need focus. We need to have people who are there because they're housing specialists. And this proposal also comes with an advisory body that's aimed at a panel of experts who are there to help the directors. It's not an oversight body. It's a how do we get this job done body.
Yeah. And as you point out, I mean, because it's been housing and human concerns, and they are trying to tackle both, and of course, especially during these past couple of years when we've been going through COVID, there have been so many needs on those fronts in the human concerns arena as well. So they've just been inundated.
Yeah.
With
so
a lot of work.
I'm very much a proponent of this proposal. The fact I wrote the proposal, and the commission received almost unanimous support from the public throughout our hearing process. We didn't have too many items that got nearly unanimous support, and this one pretty much picked that up. So the way the ballot is organized, the way the commission organized it is to make to put the more less complex issues first, the ones you get your head around, whether you agree with it or not. There's just, so this housing one will just take the existing housing and human concerns department and break it into two. Housing over here doing housing development, human concerns over there doing all the social service work that we need to be doing in our community.
Right.
So
we're not losing anything. We're gaining focus.
Right. That's what we're doing.
On housing development. Yeah.
That's correct.
Yeah, which is really important.
And if you ask any economist at all, I mean, what's our problem? And it's supply and demand. We just don't have enough units for the population. So, I mean, I feel the angst of the public, more housing. We're approximately three Kahaluis behind.
That's a great way to put it.
No, right. I mean, that's close to the number.
Wow.
So, I'm talking about the Dream City Kahalui, not with Maui. But it's that much. If you were to take and put it in single-family houses and spread it across the land, we're talking about 3 Kahaluis.
Yeah, and we're also calling for more rentals too, and I know they'll take a look at that mix as well. So that's really important.
Right.
Tell me about one of. First, I want to say for the public, I've asked Dave if he might be a regular as we continue toward the ballot, talking about charter commission proposals, because there's so many proposals that are going to be on the ballot this year. But let's talk about. Give me another one of the ones that you feel was one of the most important changes.
To me, positive or negative?
Well, let's do one that's positive, and then let's take one that's negative.
All right. So the third proposal, and when I say positive and negative, from my perspective, I mean the voters are the voters, so they're going to get to choose, and the proposals are on the ballot for them to choose. So I'm not trying to steer people necessarily. I'm just trying to say, well, somebody's got to wonder why it's on the ballot, but we'll get to that. The third proposal is basically it tightens the existing ethics rules so that appointed officers to the county, different boards and commissions and offices, cannot really assume their decision-making roles until their ethics filings are complete. Some folks will be in office for a year and they still haven't filled out their paperwork. Mm-hmm. So that's just a matter of paperwork. That's chasing it down. But the second part of this, some of these proposals are composites of different ideas. Rather than having three proposals, we put them into one. And the second part of this actually deals with a situation that happened on the floor of the council where a council member promoted their company's tax exemption and got away with doing it because they never voted on it. This proposal would say that if you have an interest in something and you're in an elected office or you're on a board or commission that makes decisions, then you can't speak to it. Mm-hmm. So, you just stay out of it altogether. If you want to have somebody come and talk for you or pay a lobbyist or somebody from the company, that's fine. But the member of the body itself cannot be advocating.
For their own self-interest?
Right. Well, for the interest of the company or whatever it is that they're doing. Mm-hmm. And I think that's because we've had a situation like that. This is a reaction to a situation. It's not just a what if. Right. So this can happen and did happen. So, and the public kind of like, what was that? What but there was a puka in the rules still allowed that to happen. So and the gamut succeeded. The measure passed. So this just fixes that up. So number 3 has those kind of proposals, those kinds of.
Yeah. And the other thing is, and it's interesting, and I'm glad that this tightens that up, because when they grill people over boards and commissions and look at conflicts of interest, it's been a very interesting extrapolation of how they view conflicts of interest, and yet this was able to happen. So I'm glad that we've got some way to tighten this up.
Yeah, and it's a very interesting proposal. The last one is the Charter Commission proposal. Speaking of positive ones, I think it's positive. And there's another item on here that kind of demonstrates that entirely. Is requires the county auditor to assess the fiscal ramifications of a proposed charter amendment on taxation or spending. So the fiscal side of the things, what kind of dollar impact are we talking about? And a great example of that would be the proposed county water authorities.
Yes.
We have no idea what that's going to cost.
Right,
and,
which is very scary.
And it could be very large. And it could have a real impact on our bond rating. It could have all kinds of things because, but we'll have to explain that later. But the point is there is an actual proposal on the table today. It needs a dollar implication, a dollar review, and it did not have it in the debate. And there's a lot of what ifs and hope for grants, and a lot of people are going to just give us money, and to me it kind of ignores. Look what's happening on the mainland right now. We have two different scenarios happening. We have communities like Jackson, Mississippi, that need a whole rebuild of their whole water system so people can get running water. And they're not alone. There's a whole bunch of communities like that across the country that just need drinking water. And then we have global warming, just ripping everything out of all the infrastructure out of the ground, and having to be replaced so people can continue to live in those spaces. So, yeah, I mean, there's going to be a lot of demand for infrastructure, and whether we can get large amounts of money in order to buy the EMI system is I don't know, yet to be seen. I think that's hopeful thinking rather than real planning.
Yeah, but I agree with you that the key thing, and we were in support of this proposal as well, because the key thing too is and it kind of goes back to what I said in the beginning, right, that we had a lot of interesting ideas. But as we were trying to ferret through which ones made more sense or not, you wanted to get a sense of well, what is the impact of this, right? What is the impact to the taxpayers, and how would it work? And so I'm glad that we're going to be looking at the fiscal impacts of these different proposals and sharing that with the public, because it's unfair to say, hey, vote on this, when you don't really have any idea what the possible, negative impacts or costs will be. So we want to give people more of an overview as they look at charter amendments moving forward.
So for the sake of people who are following this with the voter guide, that item is number 11.
Okay,
and,
awesome.
So
that would be number 11. Great.
Yeah, and the item that we were talking about with the AMI is not even on the chart. That's another strange thing about this. Let me go back to the beginning on this. When we the Charter Commission, set up our voter guide with the help of Corporation Counsel. I mean, they helped build it really well, and it's a good-looking document, and it was meant to be a tabloid. For some reason, the tabloid was never printed. It was supposed to be printed and sent to the voters. And I was talking to somebody in Corporation Counsel yesterday who thought maybe it was because of fiscal concern. It would cost too much to do that. So instead of having that tabloid in the hands of every voter, we're asking the voters to go to a website and look at the material themselves.
Yes.
Or they can call the Corporation Counsel's office at 808-270-7742. That's 7.
So what they did is they sent you out a postcard. If you might have seen it in the mail, and they told you how you could either request it, or in fact, I'm looking at one right now, or it says you can request it. You can pick it up in person or get it by mail, or you can download it. So I want to give you the download address, since many people will want to do that and save time. It's www.mauicounty.gov/charter-commission. So let me say that again. It's mauicounty.gov/charter-commission. And
so, Pamela, let me follow up on that. So when you get to that page, there's no button for this. Which is, I had a conversation with Corporation Counsel yesterday about that. Just get a button on there. But right now, you have to go to there's a menu, and what you're looking for is a voter guide, and so I think it's the last item on the. It's easy to find if you put your eye to it. It's there. It's just that you have to look for it. It's not going to pop off the page at you. So when you open it up, you're not going to see push this button for the voter guide. You have to go look on a menu, and you'll find it, and it's right there.
Awesome.
Not the way I would have organized it, but there we are. That's what we got.
That's what we got. Well, Dave, thank you so much for joining us. We're going to have you on again. We're going to keep talking about Charter Commission proposals and help educate the public and tell them where they can find it, and encourage people to read up on these, because these are going to be really important. And again, the Charter Commission only gets together once every decade, so it's really important to follow the work that they're doing.
Pamela, one last quick thought.
Yes.
For the voters who are looking at the voter guide, the 2 proposals from the county council are not on that voter guide.
Good point. So
we can talk about that later.
We'll talk about that maybe next week.
All right. Thank you.
All right, Dave. Thanks a million for joining us. Great to have you on the show. Ahui-ho. All right. Our next guest is Gunars Valkers. And I just want to say that this is an amazing and visionary man. Not only is he visionary in the world of biotechnology, where he spent many of his years using his passion and expertise to grow and create some of Maui's finest chocolate, but also as he has been just a biotech expert as well. He earned a BA and has a PhD in physics at the University of California, San Diego. He worked for one of the first biotech companies, Hybridtech Inc., inventing the first fast and very sensitive pregnancy tests. And then in 1988, Gunars co-founded BioSite Inc., a company focused on developing novel medical diagnostic tests, mostly for cardiovascular diseases. And it became a standard of care BNP test for congestive heart failure. His company had at one point grew to 1,200 employees and more than $300 million in annual sales. And in 2007, he sold BioSite for $1.7 billion. He and his wife, Joreen, retired to Maui, where they built their dream home in Kapalua. And since their arrival, they have dedicated their lives to giving back to the island, using funds from BioSite sale to establish the Makana Aloha Foundation, and use contributions from the Makana Aloha Foundation to benefit numerous Maui County nonprofits in countless ways over the years. So today we're going to talk a little bit more about the company he founded in 2018, Maui Kuia Estate Chocolate, learn a little bit more about how and why he started it, and his unique business model. So, Gunars, aloha and welcome to the show.
Aloha, Pam. How are you?
I'm great. How are you today?
I'm feeling well.
Oh, I'm glad to hear it. Well, you know, you have just such an amazing career. Tell us what led you to go from being in biotech to come to Maui and then build this foundation to give back.
Well, I came to Maui to retire, not to work. Ended up that I am working a lot. I'll talk about that a little later. But the foundation was something we promised us that we would do if we ever, made a lot of money, and that ended up happening when we sold BioSite Incorporated. By the way, I didn't own the whole company. It was publicly traded by the time. So I didn't make $1.7 billion, just to get that straight. I'm by no means a billionaire, but I am wealthy. So, I have the means to, at the time I had the means to build a dream house and play around with things like cacao, which is how I got into chocolate. So I started just growing it on my property here in Kapalua because I have 3.5 acres. I've got plenty of room to grow things. So and it intrigued me because I knew it was what you made chocolate from, but I did not know, the whole process when I started growing. And I had no intention to start a business. This was in 2010. I had absolutely no intention to start a business. It was a hobby for me. And 2 years into the program, I was actually allied with the University of Hawaii at Manoa, where they had an experimental field trial going on, and I planted 40 trees. And 2 years into that experimental trial, we had a Kona wind event that was actually really severe and killed 80% of the trees. Mm-hmm. So that was pretty discouraging, but I was intrigued enough to start a larger project, which was the current farm. So I leased 54 acres from Kamehameha Schools over there on the Mauka side of the bypass in Lahaina. And we had planted about 20, and, that still was a hobby at the time. And then in 2016, I sort of assessed what this hobby was costing, and it was costing a lot of money. And it was clear I could never just be a farmer, which was my original intention, and just to grow cacao to sell the beans. That's not a really economically viable model in Hawaii. So because of labor costs. But in any case, in 2016, we decided, what are we going to do? Going to shut the farm down and I'm going home and lick my wounds, or am I going to do more? And my wife and I decided to do more. And it had to be for a reason. So the reason is to give back to the community. And so in 2016, we established the mission statement that 100% of our net profit would be given back to the Maui nonprofit community. And so that remains our mission statement. And, we haven't had a profit up until just recently. We're just reaching over the break-even point. But nevertheless, we've been holding tastings where all of the proceeds are given back to Maui nonprofits. So in 2020 and 2021, we gave back roughly $100,000 each year in cash to Maui nonprofits just from the tastings we hold on the weekends. So if anybody out there is interested in attending a weekend tasting, the proceeds will be given back to, or the proceeds we get from the fees will be given back to Maui nonprofit that signs up for that day. So in a nutshell, that's the whole story.
Wow. Well, almost, because then you went from farming to building the chocolate factory. You're a Maui Willy Wonka.
That decision was not a small one because it ended up spending about $10 million to build the factory and ultimately to begin operating the company. So that was a pretty hefty investment.
Yeah.
And that's why we had to have a reason to do it. I wasn't doing it to make money for myself. I was doing it to make money for the Maui nonprofit community. So that's pretty much why I work 7 days a week now.
Yeah.
Versus total retirement before. But it's okay. I mean, this is what I signed up to do. This is what motivates me to get up and do good work every day.
Yeah. Well, I see you as one of those people, Gunnar. Your mind's always working, and I'm just wondering how your wife is adapting to all of this with all the work that you're doing.
She wishes I'd be home more often. I have to admit that. Someday I'd like to cut back to 5 days a week from 7. But I do spend sometimes, a day at home. But usually it's doing emails and answering various things that I have to deal with relating to the business. So I'm not exactly relaxing even when I'm home right now.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, and I know that you're personally conducting those chocolate tastings and telling people all about your passion and the phenomenal chocolate and walking them through the spectacular flavors. How is that going? And I know that in addition to that, you've also added farm tours.
Right. Well, we've collaborated with, on the farm tours, we're collaborating with Maui Chocolate Tour, which is actually a separate company that is run by the same group that runs the Maui Pineapple Tour. And they're very experienced at doing that. So we get a percentage of revenue, but we don't actually own that company. Mm-hmm. But they do bring people to the factory because the tour starts and ends at the factory. So after people have had, the experience out on the farm, and there's actually a tasting involved out on the farm as part of that experience. Once they had that and tasted the chocolate, they're ready to buy chocolate. So it's been a good collaboration.
I think that's so exciting because I've taken people on farm tours up country and with some of the farmers that I know, and people really love that sort of, again, how does it get from the farm to where I actually eat it, and to see that they're getting that full experience and learning all about cacao and cacao farms and challenges in farming as well.
Yeah.
It really gives a great perspective.
It's especially interesting with cacao because most people really know nothing about it. I mean, I knew relatively nothing about it when I started, right? So when you ask the average people, where chocolate comes from, they sort of don't really know. Oh, it comes from beans, I think, but they don't actually understand the farming aspect of it. Because there are no farms, in the United States, there's only place you can grow cacao is Hawaii. Yeah. Because it doesn't grow in temperatures below 60 degrees Fahrenheit. So it's truly a tropical tree, and if you don't go to these remote areas where cacao farms exist, you've probably never seen a cacao tree.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's a funny-looking fruit.
Yeah, it is. It's beautiful, actually. Many different colors and shapes. It's really, really quite beautiful.
Yeah. So now here you are in your what was to be a retirement plan, working 7 days a week, creating this phenomenal chocolate, and you started out with a very unique business model on how you were going to market and promote the chocolate. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, the original model, it's not somewhat exists still, but the original model, this was just before COVID hit, because we really opened the business literally a few months before COVID hit. Our original model was to sell to hotels and restaurants and get the chocolate into the hands of 1 million people a year. And that we wanted to do that as soon as possible, because we know that when people eat the chocolate, taste the chocolate, they like the chocolate, they want to buy the chocolate, right? It's much harder to sell a concept where people have never sampled the product. So we wanted people to sample the product, right? And as soon as they did, we felt, the people that really like chocolate, they will like this. They will want, to find our website or come to our factory if they're on island and find us. And that model does work. It has worked. But unfortunately, when COVID hit, all the hotels and restaurants, which are our primary wholesale outlets, shut down. So, we had no way of accessing customers except online, and we didn't have a customer base. So our online business was actually pretty small in 2020 and 2021. It's growing now because we have a much larger customer base. But it all came largely from exposure of having the chocolate tasted by people either at a hotel, restaurant, or on the farm tour. I mean, that's one of the main reasons the farm tours made us retail successful, because people come to the factory after tasting the chocolate. They want to buy the chocolate.
Absolutely. Well, Gunars, we're going to have to wrap up in just a few seconds, but tell everybody where they can get this phenomenal chocolate.
Well, our factory and retail store are at 78 Ulupono Street in Lahaina, and for those of you that are locals, it's across the street from the old Star Noodle restaurant site, and it's next to the Adventure Park Maui. So those are two landmarks, also next to the Mormon temple up there on Ulupono Street. So those are three landmarks that I think somebody in the audience will recognize.
Absolutely.
And, we're literally across the street from all of those. So if you don't know where they are, then just look up the address, 78 Ulupono. Or catch us on MauiChocolate.com. That's our website. Pretty simple to remember. You're in Maui. We make chocolate, MauiChocolate.com.
Gunars, thank you so much for being on. Have a wonderful day. And for all of our guests, thank you for listening in. This is Business Matters, brought to you by the Maui Chamber of Commerce. We want to send blessings and aloha for a beautiful Maui day, and hope you'll tune in again next Tuesday.